Hello and welcome to your next instalment of the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and him, the editor extraordinaire, the man with the words, the one and the only Mr. Gavin Harper. Hello, sir.
How are you, Bruce? Nice to see you this midweek.
Yeah, very well. It's interesting times. It's a funny one coming out of a bit of a break and then bang, it's like so much happening. European games, squads announced, Six Nations round the corner. People always asking, "Have you any spare tickets?" I've got hundreds of them just lying about. Let me go and pick off. What stand would you like? It's interesting. It just feels like there was like a calm. We built up to everything for the 1872, and it was Christmas festive period. Everything was, and then it was like, oh right, where's the rugby gone? And then it's bang back into. I mean, you must have given the pen a wee rest, and now it's back to scribbling again.
It's certainly getting a workout this week. Yeah, look, it was nice to get a bit of time off start of the year, but like as you say, once you get going again, actually you're into some pretty big games with big consequences for Edinburgh, Glasgow, and then we're only 16th of January, score obviously, Scotland score announced yesterday. Like, it all just happened so quickly. And before you know it, we'll be sitting on the 31st of January, reflecting on the team, looking forward to the Italy game. So, yeah, look, it all comes round so quick. But look, it's an exciting time of year. There's loads happening. And we've been in this position so many times where we've said, Scotland have got no hope. Scotland are going to win one game if they're lucky.
Oh.
And yesterday at the score announcement, folk are talking about, is this your time to win the championship? And you just want to say, like, myself included, maybe all got a bit carried away in the last few weeks. But when you see some of the other squads come out, and like France have brought back Ntamack and Dupont, and their squad's just ridiculous. Ireland have got James Lowe and Dan Sheehan fit, and like, look, it's going to be a great championship, but let's deal with one game at a time, I think.
There's stories all over the place, and I know that there's not been a lot of rugby with that break, but then you think, right, we've now got, Alona Mar is making people sit up and take notice about the game that hasn't been there. The Celtic Challenge is going, Merrill's struggling, Rachel Malcolm's back, the 20s, who's going to be in that squad, and then Edinburgh and Glasgow going well in Europe, and then the Scotland squad gets announced, and the first thing I looked at without knowing any detail is Kyle Staines not there. But obviously there's an injury that was kind of kept reasonably quiet. And I think a lot of people only found out when they looked at the squad and thought, where's he gone? So the latest on Kyle Steyn?
Is, I mean, both Franco and Peter Murchie have done a good job of not giving too much away on that. Franco after the game against Racing, and Pete Murchie when he spoke to us and others at the start of the week. The latest is Kyle Steyn definitely no for Italy, probably a no for Ireland, but Gregor seemed pretty confident that he would be among one of probably 4 or 5 who could come back into the mix for the England game at Twickenham. So round 3, which, depending on the way the first 2 games go, you can either say, well, we're going to get a load of guys back who've got experience who might help a squad that's struggling after a couple of games, disappointment, or you just further increase that depth. Kyle Steyn comes back, and potentially Scotland are in a good place already. It might go one of 2 ways, but he's certainly a guy that you would want back. And I suppose it's just about how you then get him in that 23.
Who else is potentially coming back into the mix?
Yeah, so I think around the same time, Cam Redpath is likely to be back. You've put me on the spot. Ben Muncaster's one of the other ones, and Adam Hastings. So I think when you look at that group, there's a fair bit in that, and I think from memory, Gregor talked yesterday about some other players needing maybe a bit of a run of games. So somebody like Cam Henderson, who's played 4 or 5 games for Leicester, might come into consideration depending on, well, A, how the locks are going, and B, if he's kind of proved his fitness a bit further. So I think you look at that and say, in years gone by, Gregor has picked squads and other Six Nations coaches have picked squads, and you've been saying, we look pretty thin on the ground in some positions. And we still maybe do. Tighthead's probably the one that sticks out. But across the board now, if Scotland pick up an injury or two, it feels like there's people who could come in and do a job or certainly add experience.
Yeah, it's funny you mention Adam Hastings. If he didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have any luck at all. Like, to think that he's injured and then all of a sudden this guy Fergus Burke appears, and it's like, where did he come from? And everybody's getting excited about Fergus Burke, and you think Adam Hastings, just, I'd love that guy to get some kind of run or form or something, because he seems to get going and then boom, something comes along. So come on, he's the name on everybody's lips. Fergus Burke, speak to me. Tell me more.
Gregor was really enthusiastic yesterday, as you would expect. Said that Scotland have been... So Fergus is born in New Zealand. He's got a Scottish grandfather from Glasgow and an English mum, so obviously qualifies as well for England. But Gregor said that, Scottish Rugby have been aware of him for the last probably 2 or 3 years, that he's kind of been on the radar. He maybe would have come in the autumn, but they didn't feel he was quite ready. But now, obviously, that injury to Adam has opened the door for him to come in.
And I need to butt in, because I'm almost laughing here. Like, I would love to know how this stuff goes. So Gregor's been aware of him for 2 or 3 years. You've had a tour in the summer where players have gone to be capped and get experience. You've got a test against Portugal in the autumn. You've got an A fixture against Chile, which was a capture international, and Fergus Burke didn't feature. So what's been going on? Has he been having a chat to Steve Borthwick? Has Razor been on the phone? How? And we can only ever guess, right? And this is barroom, clubroom chat. But I find all of this stuff really, can there be a fly on the wall documentary? How does it go? Is it Gregor that phones up Fergus and goes, Fergus, like, do you like your shortbread, big fella? Like, what's your thoughts here? And then Steve Borthwick saying, listen, Saracens, I'm just intrigued as to how these things actually play out and why now. You're right. I mean, the Hastings thing speeds it up, and Ben Healy doesn't seem to have hit. Ross Thompson's probably feeling I don't know if he's feeling a bit hard done by. Donkey Weir, it just tickles me every time. But you've got and then Fergus Burke arrives.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that when we asked Gregor yesterday, has there been any interest from England? He seemed to be of the opinion that England, there had been no direct contact. But Fergus Burke has signed for Saracens. You would therefore, and they will have assumed we're getting an English qualified player at that time. But not long after he signed, we spoke to him and he said he would be perfectly open to playing for Scotland. So it feels like one that Sarries have probably been aware of being a potential for quite a while. And I think if you look at England's options at 10, George Ford, Marcus Smith, Finn Smith, it feels like Fergus Burke is a fair way down the pecking. There would have to be some apocalyptically bad injury crisis before Borthwick's on the phone. I think I probably look at this as a selection with the kind of the future in mind. We've seen Ross Thompson, we've seen Ben Healy. Are we convinced that either of them are going to be Finn's successor? Probably not. Adam Hastings probably is that. Tom Jordan did well in the autumn, but hasn't had huge amount of game time, hasn't really had any game time for Scotland at 10. So then you look at somebody like Fergus Adams, and injury opens the door, and I think the contact, to answer your question, the contact will have come from Gregor. I think he said yesterday they'd been aware of him and they'd been speaking to him since basically before he moved to Sarries. So you anticipate that this has been on the radar for quite a while. Why now? I guess the A thing is an interesting one because they could quite easily have called Fergus into that A squad, played him against Chile and captured him. But I don't think that was a one, like a few years ago we had the Cam Redpath, England or Scotland, Gary Graham, England, much to his old man's dismay, England or Scotland. I don't think it was that this time. I think this has been more of a rugby decision about, right, actually, is Fergus Burke playing well and playing decent enough that he gets in ahead of Ross Thompson on merit? And I think probably now, for those who watch a lot of Premiership stuff, he's been pretty good for Sarries over the last few weeks. So that probably explains the selection now and the kind of timing of it.
And we've spoken about this before. I don't think you're picking a 10 on the bench because Finn's going to play 80 minutes. So, but Tom Jordan and Blair Kinghorn potentially give you that flexibility that you don't have to play. You don't have to have a 10. So I'm really interested to see, when the squads get announced, it does call it, but really I want to see who's your 23. I think for Kyle Steyn not being there, it's an amazing opportunity for Darcy and Duhan, who must be stick-ons for 11 and 14. So it's a chance for them to go, right, it doesn't matter if Kyle Steyn's back because we're in charge. We've got the jerseys, we've played well. Kyle Steyn can come back, but he's going to have to play behind us. But it does give potentially a chance, for the likes of Kyle Rowe to have a crack. I think we could pick that backline now. Ben White, Finn, Sione, Jones, Duhan, Darcy, and Blair, I think, is he's starting.
I think it's interesting that because Ben White's the one all of a sudden that you start saying, well, you can make a case for the other two because
totally. I'm picking the team I think Gregor picks. I think Gregor picks Ben White.
I think he probably does, and I think that's probably why he's gone 3 9s, left Ali Price and Gus Waugh out, and this is his group. But the problem Ben White's got is he's stuck behind Baptiste Serran, who's playing like if Dupont didn't exist, Baptiste Serran's France 9, he's probably captain, he's drop kicking conversions and also he's like the guy's in the form of his career. Ben White stuck behind him at Toulon. So does that cause a problem? George Horn's playing well. George Horn's probably in the just about the form of his career. Jamie Dobie almost becomes that. If you start talking about the bench and how that's made up, okay, you can go Tom Jordan because he covers 10 midfield, fullback. To give you the maximum sort of security, you could put Dobie there. So then it becomes a shootout, George Horn or Ben White as the starter. And I think you're right. I think Gregor's has shown in the past that he's gone to Ben White for big occasions, big games, but that would be really harsh on George, who's probably at the minute playing the best of the three of them, who might not end up in the 23. And the same goes if you go 6-2 on the bench, you're either not getting Kyle Steyn in the 23 at all, or you're one of Duhan or Darcy miss out completely. So
see if Scotland pick a 23 that doesn't have Johnny Matthews or Jamie Dobie in it. Johnny Matthews or George Horn in it. There's something wrong with the world. There's something wrong with the world. It's one of those ones, and having been a coach and left, sometimes it comes down to your gut. I get that, but I would love to know what does Johnny Matthews and George Horn, what do the two of them have to do to play for Scotland or start for Scotland or be because I don't know what else the two of them can do. George Horne, Player of the Month for Warriors, and like you say, possibly in the form of his life, you could play him at 9, 10 or on the ding-a-ling and he'd probably still give you whatever he gives you. But I find it fascinating. Personally, the team I think Gregor picks the back line, but I don't know what the bench looks like. I think Tom Jordan gets a shot.
Yeah.
I think the decision comes around who covers 9, whether it's Dobie to cover 9 in the wing or George as a 9 and possible wing. But a bit like I said about Finn, a lot of that backline I think plays 80 minutes.
Yeah,
I don't think you replace really any of them other than 9. I don't see Finn coming off. You wouldn't take off Sione at captain. It's unlikely you're taking Hugh Jones off. Blair is also at the point in his life where things seem to be close to perfect. And Duhan and Darcy, although they might not be in the game, when they are, it could be worth 5 or 7 points. So I'm not sure. If I was coaching, if I was Gregor, I don't see what's on the bench that would make me go, right, I'm subbing that because that's going to give me something different or an up or a change.
Yeah, I think the debate has to come around. That's why I think the 6-2 bench becomes more of an option, because I think you're not potentially changing that much. I think what will be the debate is who starts. So do you start, for example, for certain games, Ireland, do you start Tom Jordan at fullback and put Kinghorn on the wing? Because the theory is Ireland are going to pepper us with high balls and Kinghorn's maybe better than Duhan fielding them from the wing.
Nah, you're not. Nah, I thought you were going Blair for Darcy there.
Nah, I think Darcy is more all round than Duhan. I think Darcy's got to play. Darcy's got to play. Like every time you get the ball in Darcy's hands, whether he's against whoever, like the best players in the world, Cheslin Colby, like Darcy causes problems. I think too often we've seen in the past in really big games, Duhan can drift out a game, and that's got to be the thing that I think Gregor looks at.
Nah, I don't think that. I don't think there'd be a change here. I'd be surprised if there is. But there's
I would be surprised.
There's a lot of players in there, like Rory Hutchison. Like he's another one. He's like the nearly man. We've been kind of wondering about him for a long, long time. If he was at Edinburgh or Glasgow, would he have had more than he's had with where he? I don't know. Matt Curry, I've got a lot of time for. Stafford, the same. But that's us pretty much covered everybody that's been picked as a back in that squad, other than Fergus Burke. I reckon there's probably only 10 of those backs are going to feature in a 23 if everybody's fit.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Like the Hutchinson one's so funny because, he plays 13, he plays 12, he played 10 last week for Northampton and looked pretty comfortable. That was a weird one. I watched that Northampton game against Stad, and remember Charlie Savala that played for Edinburgh?
Savala, yep.
There was a Finn Smith pulled out, so Hutchinson moved from 12 to 10, and then Savala, who was a 10 at Edinburgh, came in and played 12, and it was just totally, to me, that's totally random. But like Hutch looked so comfortable at 10 and like when Northampton were getting front foot ball and stuff, like he was absolutely flying. But he's another one you look at and say, there's not really room for him, and unless Hugh Jones gets injured.
Yeah.
And even if Hugh Jones gets injured, I probably think Gregor goes Sione and Stafford. But who knows?
Really? I'm interested by that.
I just think that combination, because they are more used to playing together, and then Hutch is now playing more at 12 than 13, so it doesn't feel like there's a natural 13.
I would like to see Curry outside Sione.
Again, look, we've talked for long enough about, like, I think Matt Curry's got the potential to be a really, really top player I feel a wee bit sorry for him in that the first half of the season's probably not gone for Edinburgh the way they would have liked with ball in hand. But look, I think against Van at the weekend, I'm sure we'll talk about that game, but like, he was good. You know, he was kind of involved in a lot of the good stuff.
He's a proper player. He's
Yeah,
a
he
proper
is.
player. But
He is.
I don't think he makes a bench.
No, I think you're probably right.
Because Jordan does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're not gonna have Jordan and Curry, knowing that Jordan can cover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way up to 98. I think so. I'm not sure there's a space there. Up front, I think I'm interested. I think the front 1 to 8 probably picks itself.
Yeah, I mean,
Schumann, Ashman, Fagerson. I'm interested to see if it's Gray and Gilchrist. Fagerson, Darge, Dempsey.
Back row spot on. 2 of the front, both the props spot on. I think the doubt for me is the hooker. Like, I think probably it is Ashman, but like I've said for a few weeks now, his set piece is probably his line out throwing, probably one of the poorest parts of his game. And to have brought a guy back from 18 months out, Dave Cherry, and then Gregor, when he talked about him yesterday, said, look, set piece is basically the reason he's in. I'm not convinced you bring a guy in who's 34 and is clearly not probably going to make the next World Cup, etc. If that's not with a view to, right, our set piece hasn't been good enough, we need to fix that. He's the best line out thrower, if you like. So there's a question there, and then I think the second row, I hope Johnny Gray's like, let's hope he plays this weekend and he gets some decent minutes next couple of weeks. Because
so you think Cummings in front of him?
I think
Cummings and Gilchrist.
Possibly but Cummings is more of a guy who I would want coming on with 20 minutes to go than Johnny Gray. I'm not sure Johnny's got that game changing, whereas I think Scott kind of is a bit more effective in the loose. So again, it could be a selection that's horses for courses, and depending on who we play against, I think you want to match Ireland and France physically, so possibly you need Johnny and Grant Gilchrist together, and then Scott Cummings off the bench. But if you want to move teams about, Cummings is maybe the man. I don't know. There's certainly some interest in. I'm surprised Sam Skinner's not in the squad. I think he's been good since he came back for Edinburgh. So
yeah, he was one I wondered, because he's a name that's definitely missing. Like there's no other reason there. He's missing, and I'm kind of surprised at that. But Johnny Gray comes back, which maybe takes that slot. Obviously, Marshall's in front of Sam Skinner, or it feels like it was right. And Marshall is in, and I can't even pretend to know the difference of who's playing better or who. But Marshall's probably had that run of games compared to Sam.
And I think that's what it's come down to. Gregor said yesterday that he felt that Marshall had more games and was probably more consistently hitting a level of that they expected. He also talked about the way that Marshall won a cap in 2021 against Tonga in that game that Sione made his debut, and there was loads of new caps. But he said, look, he's more kind of effective. He's obviously a big guy. I mean, he's more effective now with the use of his kind of physicality. So, again, that's maybe counted in his favour, whereas Sam Skinner's more of the, like, I don't want to call it a hybrid, I hate that, hybrid forward, but that 5'6" Gregor Brown type could hang off the side of a scrum, but probably more suited to taping their ears up. So, yeah, they're probably... I'm not sure Sam and Marshall would have been a direct competition, but, the one thing I would say about the second row is if Johnny Gray's not at 100%, it feels like we're a bit short, because we've then only got 4, and one of them is Gregor Brown, who's, again, maybe not a test match. Kind of that Rob Harley could could do a job in either second row or back row. So
there's a bit of flexibility there, though. There's a few quick, because I know you're a Bayliss fan, and I can't pretend to know enough about Bayliss. So while I think there's probably a lot of clear-cut decisions up front, maybe other than 2 and 4, you've got Bayliss and Jamie Ritchie. I don't think both of them make the 23. You've got Cummings or Gray. I'm not sure which one starts or which one is potentially on the bench, and I appreciate your views of, he might not. The loose head behind Pierre, is it Suz or is it Batty? The hooker Richardson, who again I don't know enough about. The thing that seems to be exciting about him is he can cover, but I don't think we need our hooker to cover the back row. You spoke about Ashman, so does Ashman start, and then Cherry is there if you need, and knowing that when it comes to that line out in the 79th minute that you've brought on Dave Cherry and you've nailed it. So I get your point about the set piece. When is the set piece more suitable for Ashman? Is it at the start with a team that you've drilled and you've prepped and you've prepared for, knowing that everybody's fit and fresh and ready to go for the first 50 minutes, and then you bring on Dave Cherry when other changes are made and people are tired and emotional, there's 2 minutes to go and you need 6 points to win, so that catch and drive in the corner, there's all these things that go into the mix. I can't pretend to pick that bench.
Can we not talk about 79th minute lineouts? It's 10 years since Australia, and I still have horrific flashbacks. I don't think any of us will ever get over that. I think
I've taken for granted. Who's your second choice tight head?
I think that's it. Like, I'm not sure.
Hurd or Ray?
Probably Darcy Ray. Like,
interesting.
I think Will Hurd hasn't started a game, unless this changes clearly in the next 48 hours. Will Hurd hasn't started since Scotland played Portugal, and
there's one of the things that winds me up. I've had issues with representative coaches before who play players on the bench because they say, but they have to get used to coming on and making an impact, which winds me up. But Will Hurd not starting a game, does that matter?
I don't think necessarily him starting a game doesn't matter, but he's really low on minutes since those games. So, I don't think he's played since that kind of week between Christmas and New Year. So I think there's probably a concern, is he undercooked slightly? Darcy Ray's been in reasonable form for Edinburgh.
Good form and on an up. I think there's a bit of momentum there. I think for somebody like Darcy Ray, new contract, speaking positively. I don't know him. I don't know Darcy Ray, so I don't know what he's like in and around the squad. But I noted when Gregor spoke about Fergus Burke, one of the first things he said was, "We'll get to know about him as a person and a player." Yeah. So they obviously want to see, how does he gel? Does he, he'll not really know any of the boys, I wouldn't have thought. No. But he gets to come in and they can see how he interacts, because there's some players in that squad have been in Scotland squads for a long time, and some who not necessarily have been consistent, but Darcy Ray was in the Scotland squad a long time ago.
Yeah, this is it.
And so there's a real mixture of, and we've not spoken about him yet, but we need to, because Jack Mann's story is unreal. But you've got such like Dave Cherry out for ages, back in. Darcy Ray, where did Darcy Ray go? And then all of a sudden, bang, Edinburgh, new contract, Scotland squad, cap, going well. New players in, Fergus Burke, didn't know anything about him when he arrives. Ben White, there's so much going into the melting pot of this Scotland squad.
Totally. And how many of those people you've just mentioned, Darcy Ray, Dave Cherry, we'll talk about Jack Mann, but how many of them would have thought, my chance is done? Darcy, first cap 2019, then against Fiji, he must have thought, my days of playing for Scotland are finished. And actually what he's done is he's plugged away. He spoke really well a couple of weeks ago when it wasn't going well for him at Edinburgh. And he realised that was because he was still living in Glasgow, he was socialising with all the Warriors boys, and he wasn't, he admitted himself he wasn't fully committed to playing for Edinburgh. And being a boy from Ayrshire who played for Glasgow, he found the change pretty difficult. To then say, do you know what, I'm going to have to make the most of this opportunity. I'm moving to Edinburgh. I'm fully committing to the whole thing. There's an opening, clearly, because WP Nell retired in the summer. Paul Hill's come in and done a good job, but when Paul Hill's been injured, like, you probably haven't noticed that he's not there. And Darcy's, I think, deserves that next opportunity. And I think it shows that, you know, we've talked loads about lack of tight heads and all that kind of thing. But if you're in one of those positions and you can kind of hang in there, before you know it, you find yourself in a Scotland squad and probably in a Scotland 23 and trying to, you know, playing and win Six Nations games.
I think you're going to say win Six Nations there, because I think he could, this, you know, the cherry on the cake could be he's going to be a Grand Slammer come the end of March. Like how what a story to tell.
I mean, like, how good would that be? But let's
right. So here's give me my moment. Right, give me my moment. So Scotland obviously going to be Grand Slam champions. Right.
Right. Okay.
We're going to have Schumann, both Fagersons.
Yeah.
Darge, Dempsey, Russell, Van der Merwe, Tuipulotu, Jones, Darcy Graham, and Blair Kinghorn as British Lions.
Feels one or two light, but okay.
One or two light. Who else you taking?
I think a scrum half gets in.
George Horn.
Depending on who has a really good Six Nations, Ben White could go. George Horn could go. Like, there's no reason George Horn.
Hey, listen, if you're saying we're one or two light, here's my one or two: George Horn and Johnny Matthews, British Lions.
I mean, can you imagine that? Johnny Matthews can't get in a game for Scotland, but Andy Farrell says, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to know what's in that Lions Cup. Johnny Matthews for the Lions started here, eh?
100%. Like, it's mental. The 2 years ago, I thought, yeah, Scotland are going to get Grand Slam, and it didn't go well. Last year, I thought we'll be lucky if we win one game.
Yeah.
It's unreal, the ridiculous roller coaster that you have as a Scotland supporter. But that forward pack, like, it's so crucial. It's so crucial to see. There's, like, it doesn't matter that backline. If we're not winning line-out ball and we're under the pump, then none of them are going as Lions, because they're not going to show themselves like that. And I think England can't be that bad, or that's not true. They can't keep losing games by less than 7 points for too long, I don't think.
Yeah.
France are France. They don't care about the British Lions. They could not care, but they want to win the Grand Slam and they want to play sexy rugby. Ireland have this chip on their shoulder about Scotland being their noisy neighbours.
Yeah, and just very quickly on that, like, I was listening to someone earlier, and Rob Carney was like unusually complimentary. Said that Scotland would be Ireland's toughest game and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know, I get a sense that there's a bit of a change of opinion from them, given the way that you've obviously know Andy Farrell. A bit of a tough autumn. It feels like they've got a lot of players who are, 33 plus. I don't know.
Cian Healy's about 438.
Cian Healy
went to school with Jesus.
And one of Cian Healy's first games for Leinster was against the Border Reivers, and Gregor was playing. Which,
and the black and white TV.
I'm not even sure it was on black and white TV.
It's the Ireland thing. I think they big on defence, kick the leather off it, be really efficient. Don't let Scotland play. Shut everything down. Make the mess of the breakdown. Like, it's Ireland. They need to play sexy rugby. Like, they're not interested in sexy rugby against Scotland. I don't think that's going to be pretty to watch. The Ireland game.
It will be if Scotland It will be if Scotland get the ball and can impose themselves. But I think you're right. I don't expect
the England game. I'm really interested, and some of that will come down to who Borthwick picks. The France game always bothers me because I think we can beat France, but you're relying on France kind of hitting a bit of self-destruct, and Scotland have to be really good. I still believe that against France.
I think the other thing about that game, and like from a selfish point of view, and for anybody who's going to be in Paris, folk will say, imagine if that was a Grand Slam decider. I think that's the last thing Scotland need. I think if Scotland go into the last weekend with a sniff of winning the championship, I would hope either France are on the same footing or the French are out of it. And it's because if Scotland go to Paris needing to win, and then there's permutations about points and all this in Paris where, let's face it, our record's not that good. Like
that's quite polite.
Our record's absolutely terrible. I mean, it could all unravel quite quickly, and it would be such a sour note to. Look, I'm getting really carried away, but it would be such a sour note to finish on.
Do you know what? I'll take it. If we're going there with a chance of a Grand Slam, I'll take it.
Oh, look, wouldn't we all? But
I think like Italy, we still always think we're going to beat Italy. Like we still, and I actually think as a first game, and we're into amateur psychology here, but first game we're prepared. Italy kind of built a bit of momentum and beat us when we went there. I think Italy first game, go for it, all guns, let's go. I think the other games. Ireland is going to be tough. Wales, we've got to beat Wales, and surely we've got to beat them well. England, I think, will be a game of rugby. Ireland will want to murder it and strangle it. And then France, I don't know. I hope Scotland are clinical. I hope when they get chances, they take them, because if we get 5 entries into their 22, we need to come back with 20 points. It has to be that, because we can't keep going. But we played really well. But we had chances. I'm sick of all but and if and maybe. We got to be more clinical. I think defensively, we're better. And if Finn plays well and has the strut, I think all of a sudden everybody just builds in confidence. Like he's our Messi, he's our Pele, he's our Dan Carter, he's our whatever it is. I mean, he's the pulse of this whole thing. Like
totally. And I think the only slight caveat I would give to that is he's probably not the first name on the team sheet, because the options behind Xander are such a drop. I think Tom Jordan could come in and do a fine job, but like Scotland, I think Rob Robertson wrote a piece of reasons why Scotland can win the Six Nations, and one of them was world-class players, Xander, Finn, Blair Kinghorn. I think if either of the first two get injured, folk are panicking. You and I would be doing emergency podcasts and all sorts.
But Xander, it's not just that. Like Finn can play 80 minutes. We know that, and he can play 80 minutes 5 times. We know he'll do that. Blair can play 80 minutes 5 times. The worry with Xander is the load will be so great.
Yeah,
because with 10 minutes to go, Xander's probably still on the pitch if the game's in the balance. Probably.
Yeah. Aye, and you look at those URC playoffs and think, okay, he did it twice. Let's say 2.5 times, because one of them was at altitude in Pretoria and after a ridiculous travel. But he's going to have to do it 3 times at least in this championship. He maybe gets 25 minutes of a rest against Wales. He maybe gets 25 minutes of a rest against Italy. But other than that, I think he wants Xander on the pitch. And it's like...
Here's a curveball. Let's
go for it.
and this would be not arrogant, but could you put Xander on the bench with a break glass in case of emergency against Wales and or Italy?
I think probably not Italy, because you want to start the first up.
Yeah. No,
Wales,
I get it.
Wales, totally. And I think that'll be in Gregor's mind, depending on the other results and the way the tournament lies when we come to play Wales.
I don't think they will. I think he'll always start, but I just wonder, is it a way to reverse that? And instead of him having to, like you're saying, give him 25 minutes rest, could you just play him for 25 minutes? Or could you keep it going and only play him for 15 minutes? Now, I don't know, in the bigger scheme of things, how big a difference is that for a professional player that can put his feet up during the week? I don't know if you remember Paul McGrath used to play centre-half for Aston Villa. Like, he didn't train because he had a bad back. He just played. Like, I mean, that was the dream. There was folk all going all over the place trying to find doctors to go, can you get me signed off for training, but I can still be fit for the Saturday afternoon? But, like, we're speaking about, we've not even mentioned Dempsey, Darge, Matt Fagerson, Bayliss, Ritchie. We've not even mentioned them. So the excitement's real, and people are talking about Scott, like Rob Carney saying that. I'm not surprised, although what I do know about Rob Carney, I'm not sure that's always what he's going to be saying. But there's players with far more knowledge and experience than we've got saying Sione and Hugh Jones are class, Blair Kinghorn's world class, Finn Russell's and Matt. There's people genuinely talking about this Scotland squad. And there was a few, I posted the squad yesterday and put, is this our year? And, there's one or two folk just going, nah, no chance, never. And I get that. And there's others going, well, it's this generation's chance. I'm pretty sure we said that this time last year, and we might well be saying it this time next year. But it feels like Glasgow URC champions, the emergence of Sione as captain, and it seems like it's flying. Blair's loving life. Xander, everybody's got him as a stick on for a Lions place. Finn Russell, best player on the planet. It just feels like there are things moving.
Yeah, you're totally right, and it feels like momentum and stuff is maybe on Scotland's side. The game against Australia in mind, and the way that other teams' results have maybe gone. But we did okay in the first couple of games of the Six Nations last year, and then went to Rome, and the wheels fell off the bus, and we were all gutted on flights at home. So let's you could see it happening, and it was like you just, obviously there's nothing we could do about it, but you're sitting in the stands in Rome just thinking, I can't believe this is happening. I cannot believe this is slipping through her fingers, and it doesn't matter. It was like when the woman let go of the boy on the door when the Titanic crashed into the iceberg. It was that you could see him going, but you couldn't pull him back up. If she just moved across a bit, he would have been all right. I think moving the conversation to happier notes, we should probably talk. There's somebody else we haven't talked at all about yet is Jack Mann.
Yeah, class. What a story. I mean,
how good.
You were talking about Darcy Ray. Like, Jack Mann, Darcy Ray was still playing and still had a professional career. Jack Mann must have been thinking, like, hand me, I'm on Indeed looking at jobs, because it must have just felt like this is never ending.
Just like, and then to have done so well in the 6 or 7 games he's had, and we keep talking about this, but it's testament to that. Everybody at Glasgow seems to be ready to step in.
There is that, but there's a huge element. Let me finish. There's a huge element of luck to this. Now, Jack Mann didn't have any luck, but when he came back, Dempsey and Venter were both out. So there was an element of need must. Listen, big fella, strap yourself up, you're in. But God love him. I mean, it must have felt like the boy at Shawshank when he came through that tunnel. It's beginning to turn into film 2025. He must have felt like this is amazing. Like, just give me the ball, let me run about. Like he must have just seen it as a lot of fun.
And I think you get that in the performances. Like, that Toulon game away, the game against Racing on Friday night, the two Edinburgh games, he was opposite Ben Muncaster, who, like, let's be honest, again, there's another, unlucky. He probably would have been in, but now he's injured. So Jack Mann maybe misses out very, very closely this time a week ago. Muncaster gets injured. All of a sudden, Jack Mann's packing his bags for a couple of months in the Scotland camp. Like, it's a brilliant story. I think it shows with only two teams that you're never, if you're playing and you're playing well, you're not that far away. I think he'll play, probably not, but he can now probably say to, I don't know if he's got a partner or if he's going with pals, but he can probably say, look, I might not be about for that summer holiday because I might be going to the Pacific Islands with Scotland. Because
I thought you had him in the Lions team there.
Not quite. But it feels like that selection that he's saying, we want you in, we'll see how you go, but actually we think you're somebody who can be Jack Dempsey 2.0, and that's a big compliment. But I think he's filled that void perfectly when he's played for Glasgow. And look, you never know. Expect Jack Dempsey will play this weekend, but it's a big ask to get through all that, to come back and hit your stride and be completely ready. I know there are other options ahead of Jack Mann, but you never know.
I wonder, because Franco doesn't like to be told what to do. I don't know if Gregor's tapped Franco on the shoulder and said, by the way, we need Jamie Dempsey to get some serious minutes here before the Six Nations. But it would tickle me if Franco went, nah, Jack Mann's my first choice number 8. Dempsey's on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. All workplaces are about compromise, are they not? So who knows how those conversations work. But I imagine Franco being quite a hard man to bend from his own plan and strategy, because he's a man with a plan for every occasion, is Franco. So yeah, let's be an interesting one when the teams are out tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, the weekend, and we're not going to chat a lot about it, but you hear footballers talking about being picked for their country for friendlies, and then they all pull out with injuries, probably because their club manager's saying, by the way, remember we're going Champions League here. Ryan Giggs didn't play for Wales forever, probably because Sir Alec was saying, what are you doing? But this weekend, Edinburgh and Glasgow have what seem like important games for both teams to keep things going. But you want, like, players psychologically, the Scotland squad's named, hang on a minute, what happens if something goes wrong? But you can't play rugby like that. You got to go full blown. And Cockers is coming with Black Lion, who, let's face it, is desperate to do something. Nothing would fill him with greater pleasure than getting a result with Black Lion. And then you've got Glasgow doing, which I would love to be at that game. I think that could be like 67-65 at the end of the game. Like, it could be class. And the atmosphere, I think, will be brilliant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, I was there when they played last season, and Stoop was brilliant. Glasgow had a fair travelling support. It was a great atmosphere.
There's lots of Regis doing there as well.
Yeah, it was a great game. And actually, Glasgow maybe should have won it, but I think it was, speaking to George Horn earlier in the week, I think it gave them a wee bit of a kick up the backside to realise what they needed to do to shut out those big games, particularly away from home. And, they obviously did that with the playoffs. Like, look, that'll be a great occasion, Saturday night, under the lights at the Stoop. Glasgow were, everything to play for in terms of getting a home tie in the round of 16 and then the quarterfinals if they make it. Like, I think don't underestimate how important that could be, because all of a sudden you've got some of the best teams in Europe potentially coming to.
It's a statement game, though. It's I think I'm underselling Glasgow. But for them to go down and knock over Harlequins, it's another reason to go, this team's serious. Like this, they're URC champions. They're in the top European competition. They're turning teams over. and it's an away game. So why wouldn't you show like it does? Yes, we want a home tie, but also we can go and we won the URC away from home. We can beat Harlequins away from home. I think it's a huge game. In Edinburgh, it's a huge game in a different way. It's back at home. We know they can win at home, but they have to keep the momentum going, because if anything slips, folk like you and others will go, well, look what happened at Hampden. Look what happened in South Africa. You talk about consistency, and then so that they have to get a result. And I think probably a performance.
Yeah, I think this has to be, and Edinburgh might think about, changes this week. I doubt it. I think they'll go as strong as they can and say, do you know what? It's Cockers. It's a chance to win again at home. It's home advantage round of 16 and possibly beyond. It's a tournament.
Let's face it, that's important, because Scottish Rugby needs some cash as well. So let's get some home games. Glasgow having to go and play away and away and away was great, and they won the URC, but it was rubbish for the finances.
Yes, so let's get those games at the Hive and at Scotstoun and give both teams a better chance of going deeper into the competitions. Both think they can win clearly their respective competitions, but I think the key here for both teams is to get a favourable round of 16 draw and then deal with that. But you're right, like Edinburgh's thing is inconsistency, and folk like me have spent far too long in the first half of the season writing inconsistent Edinburgh, and it would be nice to say, do you know what, they've actually now won 4 on the bounce, when we come and do this next week, and whatever happens against Scarlets, you kind of give them that because they'll be missing all their Scotland players and blah, blah, blah. But they've proven that, they've won 4 on the bounce. The performances were there, etc. With our top team, they can challenge just about anybody.
You look at the players out. They're, Gilco's obviously out, big miss. Ben Muncaster, Jamie Hodgson's been away anyway, although absolutely gutted for him. Went away to try and get some rugby, and then, he's got Adam Hastings' luck, I think. Ross McCann's out, Freddie Douglas is out, Benzo's still out, Connor Boyle's still out, Boss still out. So there's no... Gilco and Ben Muncaster are probably the headlines there of not being available from players that have been available more recently. But it means Edinburgh are equipped to go full-blown.
Yeah, and that's it.
Schumann, Ashman, Hill, Sykes, Skinner...
Yeah,
Richie, I'm interested. Do they play Hamish Watson, Luke Crosby, Maggie, hopefully back, Ali Price, Ross Thompson, Mosesi, Matt Curry, Darcy Duan, Wes is probably as strong as they get.
Yeah, and I think, to that point, yes, there's a couple of players out, but Muncaster obviously played last week, but you hopefully get Magnus Bradbury back, who missed the game in Van. I think Ewan Ashman, Paul Hill, possibly Ben Velicott all come back in. Harry Patterson might play some part. So there's 4 guys who have missed out on a few weeks. Harry's obviously missed a long period, but the other 3 have missed a few weeks. They'll be itching to get back into it and prove various points to various people. So there's loads to play for. They're big games in themselves. There's loads of interesting wee subplots, I think. One of the ones that interests me about Glasgow is there's still pundits who talk up the Gallagher Premiership and Quins are the great entertainers of that league, and Quins are this, that, and the next thing. Quins are a good side. Harlequins are a team that you would pay a lot of money to go and watch. So I think if Glasgow can beat them, it is a big statement. It's a big statement in terms of the competition, but it also is a big statement to folk who maybe give Premiership clubs a bit more credit than they deserve, and who maybe still undervalue the sort of competitiveness of the URC.
Yeah, I think that's Yeah, and I think that's similar to what I was saying before. I'm probably still undervaluing Glasgow and what they've done and what they're doing, but Edinburgh haven't shown the consistency. That's what they're striving for, whereas Glasgow actually have shown consistency and been successful. And it's weird that we still have probably this small country URC syndrome of, but maybe we're not good enough. But Glasgow are showing certainly that they are. Big fella, unreal. What a chat.
Just before we finish, I want to just do 2 minutes of comments and stuff. One here, justice for Johnny.
Justice for Johnny.
I've seen a lot of these. I think we might just have to collectively get used to the fact that this is maybe how it's going to look for the foreseeable. There's a strange username, but
I think he's maybe going to Everton anyway.
Yeah, I did see that. David Moyes' first signing. That could be an interesting move. This one, you could see that Kyle was carrying a knock. I actually didn't notice that because, as Gregor said yesterday, Sione was at the time feeling his hamstring, which I was particularly more concerned about. But yeah, not great for Kyle. This one, I think, is to the point I made about the midfield options. I do think Stafford and Sione are too similar, but I think they've probably got more credit in the bank with Gregor than somebody like Hutch. And then this one, Wes is great. I mean, says it all really. Wes is great, and he's been flying for Edinburgh.
My favourite bit of that comment is Wes is great. The now,
as if Wes is about to have an absolute plummet of form.
See in February, Wes is not so great, but the now, Wes is great. Gillian, you're a star. We love you. Do you know? I think for Wes Houston, he's probably benefiting from something lots of players benefit from. It's his jersey. Now that's been probably through misfortune of Boff and Harry Pat, but Wes pretty much knows he's going to be wearing 15. He probably was considered more of a winger, but needs must. So, right, I'm 15. I know I'm playing. I've built relationship with those two either side, and with him at 13, that backline has been probably as settled as it's been for quite a long time.
And I think this is where it's interesting how Sean Everett reintegrates or finds a way for Harry to play some games, because actually, if you're talking about consistency of performance, you also want consistency of selection. So all of a sudden saying, well, Harry Patterson's back fit, we need to get him in the team, doesn't feel right. And similarly, Boff, I think we'll just need to wait and see when Boff makes his return. I know Edinburgh
I agree with that one. I think if and when Boff comes back, it's a bonus. I'm not taking any timeline on Boff. I think if he gets back, great.
Yeah, I think that's it, exactly. And then just on a bit of an unrelated one, is Aaron Reid injured? I think the short answer to that, as far as I'm aware, is no. I think that's been a selection decision rather than an injury. So interesting to see how he and Gus Ward go for sale over the next couple of weeks, because I thought Aaron Reid was really good in the autumn when he got his opportunities. I think Gus is unlucky that there's so many good nines in good form.
Yeah, I think the 9 bit's interesting. I'm not sure we've got, we spent a bit of time there chatting about George, Jamie and Ben White. And we've got good scrum halves.
Yeah.
We've not got anybody particularly going, it's me.
Yeah.
But maybe we're back to the why do we not believe in ourselves a bit more? George Horn, player of the month, scoring tries, hat trick. Why are we not more excited about George Horn?
This is it. And I'm not sure if it's because that excitement in the past has always been tempered with, but he's not in the Scotland team again. So I'm not sure. But, look, the guy's absolutely flying. He can kick goals. He could play, as you said earlier, you could put him fullback, wing, tight head prop, he'd do your job, and he'd give you everything.
He's a rugby player. He grew up playing rugby. Just like you're right, and he probably has played everywhere for Howe Fife, and when he was at school, he played he's a very, very good rugby player, and the way he's been at 9 and the energy that he brings, and I kind of feel for Dobie because it probably felt like this is your time, and then George has gone, actually, hang on, wee man, I'm still here. And George Horne, I still think he's got the energy of a 22-year-old. Like he's unreal.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's the whole basis of his game, is that he's like just all action, all over the pitch. We've diverted from Aaron Reid, but I think you also don't then need, if you've got, this is the other point about Dobie, is you've got Kyle Steyn possibly back after the first 2 games, Doohan, Darcy, Kyle Rowe, and then you've got Blair who can cover the wing, and you've got Dobie who can cover the wing. You're probably all right. So Aaron Reid unfortunately misses out because he's probably just a winger.
And you have to pay Aaron Reid's travel expenses from Manchester.
And Aaron Reid's going to go back to Manchester basically every Wednesday when he's told, by the way, you're not in the 23, see you later. It's not like the old days of A internationals on the Friday night, or like the autumn when there was an A game. Do you know?
They were the days.
Under
21s, then the A team. Friday, club ground, 4,000 folk. They were the days.
Brilliant.
We need an A championship again. Forget all this Churchill Cup nonsense and just
Churchill Cup. The Churchill Cup was, I think, about 15 years ago.
I know, but it was the attempt to give folk another go. Let's just have this. Like, it would be class to have. And they can go. They didn't necessarily have to be on the Hive. They can be somewhere. I remember watching games at Stumel, Inverleith on a Friday afternoon. 20s kicked off at whatever it was, 1 o'clock, and then the A team kicked off at 3 o'clock. Class.
Look, I think it's clearly a point for another day, but I think it's definitely something that needs looked at, because, like, I was at the A game against Chile, and not very many other people were. Would we have got a bigger crowd for that if it was played in Scotstoun, Netherdale, wherever? Maybe. But I think there needs to be some addressing of the fact that since the Hive's been built, clearly you need to get your use out of that, but it's now like everything's at the Hive, and I feel a wee bit sorry for folk who are stay out with sort of Central Belt, because it makes travelling pretty tough. And if you want to go and see the A's, the 20s, the women, your options are pretty limited, and that must be pretty tough. And then you're having to pay extortionate hotel fees for Edinburgh. It's just like, it makes it an unaffordable weekend.
Tourist tax, gee whiz, we're getting political now. We're getting political, yeah, right, big fella. It's I need to get going, so I missed the start EastEnders. Great to see you, and there's loads. Hopefully, it's going to be a weekend to keep us going. I'm excited. I don't think I was this time last year. The year before, I was too excited. At the moment, I'm just excited. I think it's going to be class. Great to chat, big man. £18 for the year, £4 for the first 4 months. That's a bargain. That's an absolute bargain. Sign up now to Scotland Rugby News. Loads going on, and we'll be back next week. But in the meantime, he was Gavin Harper, editor of Scotland Rugby News. I'm Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shaped. We'll see you all again next week. Look after yourselves.